Folks, our first on-demand workshop, How to Become a Coffee Consultant, is now available for you to learn at your own pace for just €50, and it comes with a certificate upon completion. Go to mapitforward.coffee/workshops or click the link in the show notes for more details. Support this podcast by supporting our sponsors. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 3 of our 5-part series with Marianella from Farmers Project. Marianella, we're talking about direct trade. We have talked about what it is and the financial reality of direct trade. Now what we kind of want to talk about is where direct trade breaks down. What are some of the failures of direct trade? So what are some of them?
Well, there are many barriers to direct trade. When you're at the farm level, first of all, everything seems to be an unknown. Institutions, the co-ops, the buyers, they really don't want you to know how did you achieve a connection to the market. They really want to keep you in the dark about the process. And they actually build it up to be something extremely difficult, extremy risky.
The finance market does the same thing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. They want to really make you be afraid of it. And it makes sense because if you look at co-ops nowadays, they're actually struggling to get good coffee, because more and more small farmers are finding out, okay, if I go one step further from my harvest into the wet mill, if I kind of hire the wet mill of my neighbor, and then I can dry my coffee natural, all of a sudden I have a very special micro lot. And that coffee didn't go to the co-op. So the co-op is not so happy now because they're not getting the volume they need to get, and they're not getting that beautiful coffee they were expecting. So they want to keep you in the dark. And information for the small farmer, as far as doing direct trade or any kind of exporting, is not available, really. It's not one part of the training that when a lot of people talk about the farmers need to be provided more loans and more training, more technical training. Is technical as far as what to produce, but not technical about how to export.
Yeah, the legal side of the customs clearance, and it's amazing to me the number of people across the supply chain that are heavily steeped in coffee, don't know what FOB means. They don't know what farm gate means. They don't know what classic terms, how coffee is traded on the C market. They don't know what certified coffee is. And then when you start to ask them, how come you don't know these terms? You start to realize, well, actually, they're so busy figuring out their tiny part of the supply chain that they don't have the bandwidth to figure out the rest of it. And there are people conspiring against your success, because the moment you start learning about this stuff, you take away from their power to facilitate that link in the supply chain. They need you to depend on them so that you pay them for their service. And what you're saying is, I'm going to take away all the middle section of the supply chain, and I'm going to learn how to take care of it myself.
Yes. And I think if we go back to starting from the harvest, producers are not really incentivized to produce quality, because the co-ops are okay with just bring us as much volume as possible. They'll select the quality when they do their own sorting, when they receive, and they pay the producer the same price per cajuela, right? The volume measurement. So it starts right there, where producers are trained to just pick as fast as you can and get paid as fast as you can. And you're just going to be a dependent of the C market pricing throughout the whole harvest period. And so when you don't even know about quality, you're already kind of being kept out of the game of exporting, because when you're exporting direct trade, the first requirement of the buyer is quality. So there is a gap right there. You have a trench already where you're like, well, I can't really export. But it's so sad because it's like they have these producers, they have beautiful coffee if they let it ripen. They have it if they would take it to a wet mill that knows how to process it right and maybe leave some honey on it and then do some patio drying instead of machine drying. But why would you even do that if nobody's going to give you much of a differential, right?
Right.
So right there is one gap, and then the other gap is the information, like you said, the logistics and the communication is intimidating. And if you're a
Great
farmer,
word.
yeah, it is totally intimidating. If you're a farmer, you really don't have the time to be online figuring out and reading the exporting terms and trying to find out logistics and pricing. You can barely, have the energy to farm all day and deal with all the climate change challenges that everybody's dealing on the ground, and the amazing crazy weather patterns that we're having to deal with. It feels like you're on your toes all the time trying to mitigate all these crazy patterns of the weather. And so there's so many things that logistically farmers are kept in the dark, and is very difficult. I remember one of the very first customers we had, when he was staying in our house in Costa Rica, and he said, Marianella, you need to have an Instagram account, of course, 10 years ago or so, and you need to be posting all the stuff you're doing. And I said, are you kidding me? I mean, I'm soaking wet, in the rain. We're working. My hands are all muddy. You want me to be pulling out my iPhone to take pictures of how we're sliding down with a bag of fertilizer to try to get to the plants? And he's like, yeah, that's exactly what you need to do. And I'm like, that is crazy. And said, well, people need to know exactly the effort that's taken for you to connect those dots. And when I started doing that, my husband would get so mad. He would be like unloading something heavy. I'm like, hold on, let me take a picture of that. And he's like, no, I'm just going. And we would get stuck in the mud and trying to get the harvest out. And while the car is spinning, I'm out taking a photography of that reality. It is crazy, but you can't expect that from the farmers.
No.
You can't expect the farmers to be able to provide that information.
And it's a kind of entitlement, right? It's a kind of entitlement that's necessary to placate the consuming end.
Yes.
Again, it depends how you look at it. On one side, you say it's an entitlement that the consuming end doesn't have the right to demand of producers. And then on the other side of it, you look at it and say, but the reality of it is, if you want people to engage and pay attention from the consuming end of the supply chain, this is what's required to capture their attention and to separate your coffees out as a business from other producers. None of it feels fair. None of it feels necessary, but it is necessary.
Yeah, I think that I don't blame the roasters and the consumers for wanting to know what's going on. And I do think that really connects people, because I am always amazed to see when people come to the farm, the first thing they notice, there's no flat land. And so you're always kind of, you're like, oh my God, this terrain is so hard. And when people, they're just walking without any weight on any, no cajuela basket of cherries, no bag of fertilizer, no pump or whatever on their back. And they're like sweating, getting up there, getting dizzy in the altitude. And they're like, oh my God, this is so difficult. And I said, yeah, now try putting 20 pounds of beans around your waist and squatting down to pick the lower part of the tree, because if you bend over, you spill all your beans. And they're like, oh God, I didn't think about that. And so it is, I have found it very rewarding to share the real truth, because people, it's eye-opening, and we need to connect with not just the success. We need to connect with the struggle, right? And I think that that's been very beneficial for Farmers Project to make real relationships, to really engage people, because they know we're not just going to put the shiny things out there, the shiny micro lots and the shiny branding of our sacks when they make it to export and get to the import port in the United States. But what took to fill those sacks with that coffee is the real story. And a lot of people is like, tell me a little bit more about the story. And I said, I'd rather tell you a little bit more about the reality.
Yeah, beautiful. I love it. Speaking of the reality, folks, the next episode, we're going to talk about some of the myths about coffee, and specifically about coffee producers. When Marianella and I were talking about this idea, it's kind of wild what some of those myths are. So join us in the next episode for some insight into the world of coffee producing that you may not have anticipated. I really look forward to this discussion. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everybody. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in, friends. There are 2 ways you can support this podcast. Firstly, become a paid member of our YouTube channel. Secondly, you can join our Patreon for as little as $3 a month. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video before you leave, and check the show notes for more information. Now, this is what you should check out next.